Okay, this is part two on the piece I'm doing about mental slavery. I'm not going to read this one again. I did that in the first one. So I'm going to show the interview that Will did on GBN News with Neil Oliver. And then I'm going to show the hit piece that came after that and how none of the facts that were raised in the interview were ever refuted by mainstream media. And if you think about it, right, all the media, they love to refute all the things that they call what they call cookers and sovereign citizens, right? They love to refute it. So why didn't the mainstream media refute the points that got raised in the interview? Very big question for you guys to ask yourselves. And if you can't, then this statement here, it stands as a truth. So let's see it. And if you really want to test it, go ask any of the police, any of the politicians. You ask them a direct question about this and watch what answer. And especially the magistrates, right? The ones who are enforcing the criminality. Go ask them. If you guys are legitimate about finding out for yourselves, right? Not just going on hearsay, right? Not what the media tells you. If you really want to find out for yourself with evidence, ask that question direct and see what you get back. You know who else I'd be asking? The Governor General, because what you're about to find out here about the royal prerogative is going to expose the true nature of the criminality of the Governor General. So we're going to go into it right now. Okay, interview. So let's listen up.
When this is something that goes to the fundamental power that each of us has, why have we all forgotten it or never been told it?
I think largely that's because we've had it educated out of us. And so we were just talking about that before, and why is that the case? I think there's been some fun and games going on behind the scenes, because it's not good for a political power to have a citizenry that is properly aware of its constitutional powers. So,
but it is true, is it not, that it is the people? It's never Parliament that's sovereign.
Correct.
It's always it's not meant to be.
Correct.
Parliament.
Yes. As long as your constitution is based on common law, that would be described as a proper democratic constitution, not because of voting in elections. And we'll come on about that later, because that's actually adult suffrage. But the term democracy actually means something else. So there's another concealed, hidden mechanism within the Constitution that's sort of been rather airbrushed out of our consciousness over a very long period of time.
And that, as I mentioned and touched on at the top of the show, it is the jury, isn't it? That people just think they just go in there, 12 obedient people, judge more or less tells them what to do, and there's a verdict, and that's an end of it.
Yes.
But what is the function of the jury, really?
Yeah, so the jury, I mean, we all know the first function of the jury, which is essentially to judge the accused person before the court. But the hidden, concealed second purpose of the jury, that's the key. And what that is actually to judge the justice of the piece of legislation that brought the defendant into court. So to put that another way, you're actually, as a jury, judging two things. So when the defendant comes into court, you're judging the defendant, but you're kind of weighing that and balancing it against the piece of legislation, the statute, that actually brought them into court. And the jury has the right, the independent right, to judge on the justice of that piece of legislation as well.
So the jury is not bound by that legislation?
No.
In any sense?
No, not at all. Absolutely not. So this is called jury independence. Now, I mean, they're a bit coy about this, and that's why we're not being told. It's a very concealed concept. And generally speaking, juries are not told of their power and their right to judge the justice of the law. But they are absolutely, they have the right to judge on that independently of the legislation.
So, in the last couple of years, when legislation was coming down and there was emergency powers and all of the rest of it, and we were invited to think that, well, it's an emergency and you'll just have to do what you're told.
Yes.
That wasn't the case in terms of the independence of the jury.
Well, okay, so it's a little bit more complicated than that, simply because as soon as they shouldn't be passing legislation through Parliament, through the legislature, and there are a number of checks and balances that are meant to be in place to make sure that legislation, acts of Parliament that are proposed through bills of Parliament are meant to be checked, first in the upper house, and then, of course, through the royal prerogative. And a lot of people get a bit fussy about the royal prerogative, but they don't actually realise that that's a protection mechanism for legislation that would be contrary to the Constitution and contrary to the liberties of the people.
We are invited, aren't we, to think that the crown, the monarch, is just a figurehead. But that's not
no
and cannot be true.
No, they're the highest ranking public servant in the land. They're the first among equals.
And whose side are they meant to be on?
Well, they're meant to be on the people's. They're meant to be protecting the people's liberties. Yeah, absolutely. That's the point of the Constitution.
And so
they are the sovereign, but they cede sovereignty to the people through that power of jury independence, trial by jury. That's how it's meant to work.
And so,
not how it's working now.
And so, in terms of when what happened while we were within the European Union,
yeah,
how lawful was that the national final decision-making power, the sovereignty, was ceded to Brussels?
Yeah, completely unlawful. Yeah, yeah.
So, just going to take a pause. I want you to think about why Australia has a Governor General. What the actual reason for that was. Is it not as the representative of the actual highest public servant of the entire Commonwealth, right, which we call the monarch? Is it not to act as their representative? So how can a political party choose that, right? That's your first question you need to answer. Because they're meant to stand above Parliament and decide whether the legislation Parliament actually passes through its upper house, etc., is actually in service of the people or it's in breach of their rights, right? That's their job. Now think about, has that really been happening? There's your second question. So is that Governor General doing the job that they were employed to do by who? By we the people. Would you really ask yourself that question? Does every single bill of Parliament that turns into legislation, does that get scrutinised by the Governor General? And if your answer is no, that's all you need to know after that. And that's why they're running these sovereign citizen hit pieces, because they don't want you to find this out, the true criminality of what's been going on.
Absolutely contrary to the Constitution.
I mean, is this a functioning democracy or not?
Okay, so it depends on what you mean by the term democracy, because there's been a bit of a twist in that word. And of course, we're taught or conditioned, if you like, into thinking that the term democracy actually is all about voting in elections. It's about the majority vote, and it's not actually. That is adult suffrage. The real meaning of democracy is specifically the emplacement of a mechanism into your constitution that allows the people, through the jury, to be the final arbiter of law. And that tradition goes all the way back through early England, the English constitutional common law, prior to 1215 Magna Carta, the late Saxon kings, into Europe as well. Most of the European nations were functioning on common law as well. And then even back into the Athenian constitution in Greece.
Nick, we've been hoodwinked, have we not? Or is it just me that we don't get told this? We're not invited to know this about the powers that we have.
So I'm just going to pause it there, because these other two hosts are not going to contribute anything as far as knowledge goes to where we are right now. So I'm going to come back and just pick it up where Will speaks again. Right, let's pick it up.
I wonder people get disenchanted by it, because it changes nothing. And so people have that pushed at them. Oh, vote, yes, vote, that's your decision-making power. And what what's being hidden from them is the fact that regardless of what the government is, you can intervene at any stage via the jury to say, that legislation's nonsense.
It's a much more direct power constitutionally that we actually have. That's how the people have the authority over their own governing administration, through that mechanism. But the whole sort of introduction and the increase in the size and stature of Parliament is in a way all about that obfuscation and that confusion in the minds of the people. In that actually we've now arrived at a situation where we believe that the influence, and that's really all it is a little bit of influence here and there, is actually through this mechanism of voting in elections. But actually, when you think about that system, the party political system, really only emerged in the sort of mid-1700s. And yet we talk about democracy as something, having come from this sort of ancient history going back to the time of Greece. It's actually the time of Cleisthenes. It's prior to Plato and Socrates.
So there you have it, guys. Now, go grab your best lawyer, right? Because a lot of you who love shouting that word cooker Always go and say stuff, oh, go, get a lawyer, see what you can win in these courts, yada, yada. Go grab them, right? Play this to them and have them refute it with verified evidence. And go grab your magistrate, the same thing, your high court judges, all of them, all these people you call justices, get them all, round them up with the politicians, get them to watch this, and then have them openly refute it in public. See if it happens. Right? There's going to be your evidence right there. But now I'm going to show you the hit piece, right, that the mainstream media did, and not one of the points do they refute. Now that's got to tell you something really big, because all they did is just started cooking up conspiracy theories through calling them anti-Semitic. That's the best they could do. I mean, that's serious desperation, right? That's a classic Mossad move. Oh gosh, it's not making it easy for me, is it? It's the hit piece that the mainstream media did. Okay, was it? No, that's not it. Just bear with me 1 second. About that, it just jumped articles on me. So here it is. Here's that hit piece they did. Concedes by The Guardian. It says Jewish group and MPs urge GBN News to stop indulging conspiracy theories. And you can go find it yourself, right? It's all there for you to verify. And now they're saying stuff about Jewish organizations, yada, yada. You can read it all. I'm not going to go on too much. But now I'm just showing you where in here does it say anything about that what they've put up is actually false. You can't see it, right? It just talks about what was said, right? Then it talks about echoes a noted conspiracy theory, silent weapons for quiet. So they're using things that were never said, right? Did you ever hear the words silent weapons for quiet wars ever said in that interview? No. So they're talking about things that didn't actually happen, right? Things that are unrelated to the actual words that were said in there. So they're drawing a really long bow trying to say, well, because these ones are linked to people who sort of have some ideas, well, then this doesn't have any credibility, right? It's that old classic, let's character assassinate the people so then the message gets assassinated too. But they never outrightly refute any of the content that was raised there, right? Because they won't dare to do that. Because to do that, right, that exposes them beyond belief to the criminality of what they're actually conducting. Right? Because if they outright deny that that's not the case, right, they're showing people that we're living under a dictatorship, and they can't do that, right? Because it would wake too many people up too quickly. So I'm just screening through it, and you can see for yourself, right, that there's nothing that refutes anything that was said in that interview. Not one word, right? So they've spoken about a bunch of other rubbish. But if you want to confirm it for yourself, right, you go read it. It's just nothing in there, right? They're talking about things that are unrelated, right? So there it is for you, so you can see for yourself, right? So now, let's hear all you guys who love launching that term cookers, right? Let's hear you refute these as verified facts. Because I'm expecting you to all come on here on the channel, and not the channel, on the page, and actually start espousing your beliefs again with no evidence, because that's all that you guys can do. But your little world is crumbling fast, and so are the criminals that are keeping it up. And when there's a shift, right, when people really start getting it, you guys are going to really have a lot of explaining to do.